Good morning, YouTube. Some food for thought here. What did you think the plot of The Rise of Skywalker was going to be before the leaks may have changed your opinion on the matter? I ask this because my theories and what actually happened were so unbelievably off from what we actually got that I legitimately didn't get one thing right. Now, I chalk that up to either myself or Abrams misinterpreting the end of The Last Jedi. Now, don't get me wrong. The Last Jedi is a dumpster fire of a film. But, I stress that word, but, it set up something extremely interesting, in my opinion, for the next installment. Let's just say I was cautiously optimistic for where Rian Johnson was going to go with it. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but, it's been a while since I saw the movie. But didn't the First Order's fleet kinda sorta get decimated by Holdo's lightspeed maneuver? We can clearly see most of the Star Destroyers here get outright destroyed or at least heavily damaged. And at the end, they really only had a few of them left. Mirroring how the Resistance began the film with only a few light frigates and a Mon Cal cruiser. By the end of the film, both the Resistance and the First Order are in a state of ruin. The successors to the Empire and the Rebellion have, for all intensive purposes, died. Or rather, they have been killed. Is this ringing any bells for you?
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
The First Order has lost most of its fleet that it has been building for, 30 years? They lost their Discount Emperor, and their new Discount Emperor is a whiny toddler. Oh, and so is his second in command. They're in shambles. And yet, when The Rise of Skywalker starts, they're doing just fine. They're back to reigning over the galaxy. So, did the loss of their fleet mean nothing? I mean, yeah, with Palpatine's Ex Machina army, it really doesn't, but that's another matter entirely. Let's pretend they didn't end up getting a new fleet of Death Star Star Destroyers, okay? And the Resistance is pretty much back to square one as well. In fact, they're already on square 2 or 3 since we last saw them. They even have a discount Yavin and a discount Tantive 4 to hang out on. What happened? What happened in the time gap that we missed? They were nothing but a few troops and some officers on the Millennium Falcon. Where did the new ships and new members come from? And the First Order trained their soldiers from birth, without cloning, might I add, so there's a finite number of them. They're not just out recruiting like the Empire was. Here's how I thought the plot would address this issue. It would be something new and fresh, words that have never been spoken in a description of the sequel trilogy. The two sides would definitely still be at war with one another. I mean, come on, it's called Star Wars for Pete's sake. But it wouldn't be the same style of combat we've seen in the last two trilogies. No huge fleet battles or dreadnoughts or Death Stars, just small starfighter dogfights over resources. They'd both be desperate for more manpower, more weapons, more ships, but the galaxy just wouldn't want to willingly provide any of it. Everyone's sick of the fighting. No planet wants to align with either of the two factions because both have been tried before, and both have failed miserably. Everyone just had their third regime change in the span of 50 years, and they're sick of it. So the First Order and the Resistance have to scrounge, reduced to nothing more than hollow shells of what they once were. And like I said, most battles would be quite small, with neither side having much to spare. They'd most likely be so desperate for what they'd fight over. Old ships from the Clone Wars, or the First Galactic Civil War, and just, like I said, scrap resources, anything they could find. Broken down TIE fighters fitted with whatever the First Order could scavenge would be dueling old X-Wings and ARC-170s, maybe even some Vulture droids, or a barely functioning Venator. Old Mon Cal cruisers would be slapped together just to stay functioning, pieces flying off of it and drifting into space with every battle. The First Order would be trying their best to stay true to their colors, only using old Imperial weaponry. And the dismal amount of such tech is what would allow the Resistance to gain ground. Their refusal to change and adapt is what's killing them. Now that's the war in a broad sense, but allow me to dip my toes a little into my thoughts on a better story for our main heroes.
starting off with Finn, Poe, and Rose.
She got snubbed in The Rise of Skywalker, and you know it, whether you wanted that to happen or not. They would have their own plot, similar to the disastrous Canto Bight story, but this time, actually well written and not a completely useless venture to pad out the runtime of the film. Ryan? They would have infiltrated the crumbling First Order Stormtrooper Corps to scout out and hopefully lay the seeds of rebellion. Finn's Stormtrooper past would actually come in handy in a meaningful way for the first time in the series. Crazy, I know. Their story would focus on the trio gathering intel and slowly realizing just how tired the Stormtroopers are. They had been raised as soldiers, told they were fighting for some kind of glorious revolution, that they would usher in a new era. But instead, they've been spending the last year or so since the Battle of Crate throwing everything they have to spare at pirate-controlled shipyards just to steal one or two freighters at best, and losing half their forces in the process. No fight has felt like a victory, like they're moving forward. They've essentially accomplished nothing since they destroyed the New Republic, and even that was a short-lived victory because they lost Starkiller Base and their fleet in the same day. They're sick of fighting. They're sick of being thrown into battles ill-equipped and without proper intel because the remaining command are using them as nothing more than meat bags, doing nothing but relying on the vain hope that their troops will win on numbers alone. But they don't even have a numbers advantage anymore, and they're somehow even worse off than the Resistance. It's not like they took the time to gain allies or anything. They're alone. And as Finn gains the trust of these disenfranchised soldiers, he learns more about their thoughts on Kylo Ren. No one's seen him in weeks. He doesn't lead any battles from the front. He's just sitting on his throne, obsessing over some girl that is the least of the Stormtroopers' problems. And Hux isn't any better, because he's a whiny baby man who does nothing but complain about Kylo. The troops know that their command is incompetent, and the realization that this war is pointless is beginning to dawn on them, which is how Finn is able to stage an uprising among their ranks. This would be the primary plot of the film, the Stormtrooper uprising that we were all waiting for, and it would have been the perfect culmination of Finn's arc that started in The Force Awakens. That was unfortunately thrown in the bin by Rian Johnson. God, The Last Jedi makes me depressed. It's so bad. But that's off topic. Moving on. It is Raylo time, baby. No, it isn't. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. I'm sorry I even insinuated that was where I was going with this. I'm sure if JJ were watching, he'd be all for it, though. Rey would be training for most of the film, most likely with the ghost of Luke, and attempting to come to grips with the fact that Kylo cannot be redeemed. There's no light left in him. The last of it died with Leia, who unfortunately passed away off-screen in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I thought long and hard about this, and it's just the best way to have gone about it with Leia. Having her be CGI'd in for a few scenes, reusing clips of her from The Force Awakens, and giving her a death and a mourning scene that barely lasts a full minute is just... It's not right. Maybe the film could start off with the funeral, have the characters mourn her properly, and have it genuinely affect characters like Chewbacca and Rey. And I'll get back to Chewie later, but for now, Rey would be retraining her mind rather than her body. Since for some reason that I cannot fathom, the writing team decided that the main hero should defeat the main villain in their first ever encounter together. Yeah, that's not how an arc works, guys. And by training her mind, I mean resisting the call to the dark side. She has never once feared the dark side, and has openly welcomed it in every fight she's had in the series. I mean, is this how a Jedi fights? No, it very much isn't. She would be blocking that out and becoming more in tune with the light, and letting the Force better guide her actions. And again, Rey would have to struggle with the idea that Ben Solo really is dead, and there's nothing she can do to bring him back. Which Luke would help with, of course. I mean, his entire arc in the original trilogy was becoming a Jedi and redeeming his father, a man who no one believed could be saved. not even Yoda. So he would be the best guy to talk to when you're thinking of redeeming someone. But unfortunately, Kylo has nothing left but the dark side. He's chosen his path, and there's nothing to be done. He couldn't even turn back now if he wanted to. Rey has no choice but to kill him. She doesn't like it, but she accepts it. Well, that's her arc at least, throughout the movie. She doesn't accept it right off. She spends the film desperately searching for some way to stop what's going to happen, but she can't. Kylo's gonna die. And it all comes to a head in the finale. The Resistance leaders, without Leia's guidance, aren't quite as hopeful about Finn's mission as Poe is, especially seeing as their last plan involved a mutiny, the deaths of multiple Resistance members, and the whole thing was an entirely useless venture. Yes, I know that was entirely Holdo's fault, but we're glossing past that for this. Just bear with me, we're almost at the end. Basically, they don't want a repeat of that, and this supposed internal rebellion being staged among the Stormtroopers is taking a lot longer than they anticipated. So, they know the First Order is in the weakest state it's ever been in thanks to intel from Finn, Poe, and Rose, and they decide that an all-out, no-holds-barred attack on where the First Order's main forces are consolidated is the best course of action. Rey gets there first, of course, and her fight with Kylo begins. All the while, Finn knows that the Resistance is coming, and he's desperately trying to warn the other Stormtroopers, who are so exhausted and defeated that they've decided that being wiped out by the Resistance, dying with some honor and dignity, is really their only option. Why mutiny when they're all about to die anyway? When the fighting starts, however, Hux begins an attempt to rally his troops, raise morale, using his usual scream until my face turns purple technique that we all know and love, and one by one, the troops are just not having it. Finn has already given up, and he's trying to escape with Poe and Rose, but just as they're leaving, he turns back, and he sees something he never expected to. The Stormtroopers have tossed aside their weapons. They're taking their helmets off and throwing them to the ground, and a few are outright going after the leadership, who have decided that they will sit out this battle. Lead from the rear. And when the Resistance arrives, they are met with a crowd of Stormtroopers. The last Stormtroopers just standing there. No helmets, their faces clearly visible and varied, which harkens back to the fact that Finn is the only Stormtrooper we have ever seen take their helmet off in the entire series. Their expressions are blank, but there's an air of worry amongst everyone present. No one says a word. These mortal enemies who have spent their lives dehumanizing one another are now standing face to face, speechless. But Finn, the one man who has experienced both sides of this coin, stands between them, and he's the first to speak, telling everyone that there is no fight to be had here. They have all been fighting for too long, and it's time for it to end. The only battle still raging is between Kylo and Rey, and everyone stops as the two make their way to where everyone is standing. Both are so engrossed in their duel that they don't notice the crowd parting to let them through. Kylo on the offensive as he drives Rey further and further backwards. I'm thinking it would be an homage to Anakin and Obi-Wan's duel, the entire fight moving through corridors and across catwalks, and everyone is just dumbstruck. They're continuing their duel despite what's just happened. They're so focused on killing each other that they don't realize the fighting is over. But eventually they do, and they stop for a moment. Both duelists lowering their sabers to look at their surroundings. And of course, Kylo is outraged, screaming at his troops to pick up their weapons and slaughter the Resistance members they're standing amongst. But none of them even move. And Rey understands. She can feel it. There's not an ounce of anger or hatred in any one of them. They're just tired. She drops her saber to the ground, and Kylo, seeing this, moves to strike a killing blow. Rey is caught off guard, stumbling back as the red saber lunges towards her, only for it to stop mid-stroke. Kylo is shot in the back, the expression on his face one of complete and utter shock, turning to see Finn, blaster raised, a traitor to the end. Kylo falls to the ground dead, his final thoughts dwelling on those that tried to help him, tried to give him a path that wouldn't lead to this. His father, his mother, and Rey. As Ben Solo closes his eyes one final time, he sees Luke Skywalker standing amongst the crowd, seemingly invisible to everyone but him. Luke shakes his head, turning away from his nephew, and so ends the reign of Kylo Ren. From here on, the story would shift into its falling action, showing the galaxy rebuilding, Poe becoming the head of the new government's defense force, Rose becoming a passionate politician, maybe even chancellor, and striking at the heart of the scum and villainy she witnessed firsthand on Canto Bight. I'm sure this would rustle some jimmies, but who cares? And now, as for Rey and Finn, I'm just a little conflicted on where they would end up. I would like to say that they'd end up together, since that's obviously what was being set up in The Force Awakens, but you know, the whole thing before Rian Johnson threw it in the trash to appease Reylo fans. But, well, my idea here is unfinished, as you can probably tell, and a lot more can be fleshed out than just what I talked about here. You know, there could be a lot more scenes featuring Finn and Rey together, and I know I had them separated for most of the plot, but at least the beginning, before Finn, Poe, and Rose go undercover, could be spent mostly with Finn and Rey, possibly even Finn meeting Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker being dumbstruck that a Stormtrooper could have turned his back on everything that he'd been taught his entire life. But that's a whole nother topic for another video, I guess. And hey, if you enjoyed this little look into my thoughts on what the final installment to the Disney trilogy may have been in some alternate reality, leave a like, a comment, subscribe, do your thing. And hey, maybe check out my older videos. They're not as good, but you know, I tried. Oh, and please give me your ideas on what I could have done better here. Maybe even give me your ideas on what the plot might have been in your eyes. I'd love to hear you out in the comments below. And on a little side note, just between you and me, here at the end, this video took way too long to make. I started writing this script before I'd even had the idea for my relatable hero video. And as you can probably tell, I kinda went a little overboard in places, especially that ending. I put a lot of genuine thought into this, and really and truly, thank you for stopping by and hearing me ramble for a bit. With that being said, this is possibly Cake Tier Debater, signing off. Good night, YouTube. Sweet dreams. And hey, have some hot cocoa before bed. You've earned it.